Hey everybody, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you might be joining us from in the world today. My name is Meg Alexander. I am, as always, honored and excited to get to host another Power to Fly Chat and Learn virtual event. Now, I'm really excited to welcome all of you to our event today. We're going to be talking about honoring heritage, a Native American perspective from Jordan Cooper-Fossmo. Now, before we dive into today's event and introduce you to our speaker, I just want to go over a couple quick housekeeping items. Starting with our code of conduct. Now, this is a big wall of legalese and it sounds really scary, but basically what it boils down to is just don't be a jerk, okay? As we are interacting with our fellow attendees or networking with our speakers, just make sure that you are operating from a place of kindness and respect. Other than that, pretty hard to go wrong from there. If you have any questions on this, please feel free to DM me in the chat, or you can always write into our help desk. The address is hi@powertofly.com. All right, now this is going to give you an idea of how today's event's going to go. This will all be especially helpful if today is your first Power to Fly event. And if that's the case, then hi, oh God, we're so happy to meet you. Now, the love is no less real for my frequent flyers. Thank you all so much for joining us. I love seeing your familiar names and faces and avatars in the chat. So thank you all so much. All right, now, the biggest thing to know about Power to Fly events is participation. All right, you all took time to be here with us now, and we want to make sure that you get full value from today's event. So if you'd like to, I very much encourage you to turn your cameras on if you'd like to share your smiling, maskless faces with us safely. But there is no need to look Instagram perfect, y'all, okay? Just because I actually, put on real clothes and not athleisure today, doesn't mean that you can't come here with your bathrobes or kitchen table, desk setups, whatever you got. We don't care and we don't stand on ceremony. We just want you to meet us where you are. Now, if you do want to participate, but you don't want to do so with your camera, that's fine. We very much encourage you to ask questions in the chat. Our audience members won't be able to come off mute today, but we very much encourage you to keep that chat open and hopping. We want to hear from you. We want to know what kinds of things are interesting to you, what you are hoping to get from today's event. So please feel free to dive in there. Also, if you would like, I'm always really eager to see how far our global audience spreads. So if you'd like to, please feel free to dive on into that chat and let us know where you're joining us from. And if you know whose land you're on. I'm coming to you from Toledo, Ohio. This is land that belonged to the Fox, Kickapoo, and Potawatomi tribes in my area. So I pay respect to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Now, as we go through today's event, if you are at all excited, or if anything that we say today just mind blows for you, we are recording today's event, and what that means for you is you don't have to take notes. We are live streaming to YouTube right now. Hi, YouTube. And the video will usually be posted by end of business today to our YouTube channel. Now, that's a great option. I'll give you some links for all of this as we go. But basically what you should know is the video will be available on YouTube first, but you can always, in case you forget to go check the YouTube, we're going to be emailing everybody that registered for today's event in about 4 to 5 days. We'll give you a link in that email to where you can watch this video when it shows up on PowerToFly.com. Now, obviously, YouTube's awesome. Linkability and shareability right away is my favorite thing. But I very much encourage you to check it out on the website, if only because that is where the full motherload of all of our resources lies. So if you have ever wanted free resources, we got them, okay? We want them, we've got them, and we want to put them in the hands of as many people as possible. So whether you check us out on YouTube or on PowerToFly.com, we do have a bunch of those available and ready to play for you. Now, like I said, please feel free to ask questions in the chat as we go. I'd love to hear from y'all. Ooh, and I'm looking in the chat. We've got people chiming in from Richmond, Virginia, Portland, Oregon, Shelton, Connecticut, Dallas, Texas, Ontario, Canada, Cary, North Carolina, Burlington, Mass, Seattle, Washington. Oh, I love this. Thank y'all. Thank you so much for chiming in. All right. Now, as I go, I'm very excited to introduce you to our speaker today. So if you have questions that you want to know from her, please feel free to send them in the chat at any point. Now, Jordan Cooper-Fossmo is an account executive with Power to Fly. Obviously, we have some of the coolest people ever. Jordan was raised on the Osage Reservation in Northeast Oklahoma, a place that was made famous by the movie Killers of the Flower Moon, which depicted the murder of members of the Osage tribe over mineral land rights. Now, Jordan studied fashion merchandising at Texas State University, and she went on to do visual merchandising for Michael Kors for almost 5 years. Sorry, guys. After which she moved into tech sales. Now, as a DEIB champion, Jordan discusses the pride and power that she feels being Osage, how the tribe is known for being resilient and strong, and how she strives to honor her ancestors every day. When she's not at work, she spends time with her husband, two dogs, and a bearded dragon named Barada, which is honestly, I've been doing this a while, but possibly the best pet name I have yet to hear on this chat. So Jordan, welcome to the stage. I'm so happy for everybody to meet you today. What do you think, what else would you like our audience to know about you before we dive into our questions?
Yeah, thank you everyone for joining today. So like Meg had mentioned, I'm currently living in Austin, Texas, but had the joy of growing up on a ranch out on the Osage Reservation for years. But when I'm not at work, I'm probably cooking and sipping wine on my back porch with my husband and dogs. But it's really nice to get to be here with everyone today.
Excellent. All right. Now, we do have some additional slides for y'all that we will be using during today's event. So let me clear out here. There we go. Stop share. Okay. So we're going to be going through questions. Now, if at any point y'all have questions for Jordan or you want us to dive in deeper on any of the answers, please, please, please feel free to add in those questions in the group chat in Zoom. I've got my eyes on target there. If you do want to ask, or if you want a question to be raised, but you want to be kept anonymous, no worries. Just DM your question to me. You can find my name, Meg Alexander, in the Dropbox, or sorry, in the drop-in menu in your Zoom group chat. All right, so Jordan, we've got some pictures to start with, as well as some really honestly amazing images here. So let me get those back up on the screen for us while you tell us a little bit about them.
Yeah,
There we go.
awesome. Cool. Yeah, so I actually shared this in funny enough, one of our org company calls. So these two images are actually from my grandmother's house. So this is actually the sail of the Osage Nation that my grandmother actually cross-stitched herself. And then down below, you can see some pictures of a bag, there's some spurs, and then there's actually a drum. I should have probably added more. We have some of my childhood moccasins, arrowheads, and a lot of beautiful pottery as well. But these were taken directly from my grandmother's home.
Absolutely amazing. And really, I very much appreciate things like this because I feel like as somebody who grew up in white America as opposed to the actual America, I think that there are probably a lot of not necessarily even misconceptions, but just holes in the things that we think that we know about, the peoples whose land we are actually on and the people that were removed because colonizing. So obviously, Jordan, this is going to be a pretty intense discussion for some people. Are there any things that you want us to know or level setting that you want to do before we dive into questions?
No, I think we can just dive right in.
Okay, sounds good. All right. So one of the key things that I think will probably give us more of a connection to the past and to your history. Could you tell us a little bit about how you stay connected to your Osage heritage in your daily life?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that the technological advances have come such a long way. And so my particular tribe is actually very active on social media. So I follow a number of different accounts. And one of the things that they do that I absolutely love, and it's one of my favorite things that they post, is they will do these cultural connections. And so, for example, there's one on how to make fry bread, which is a really big, really high up as far as like our food group goes. There was one on finger weaving. There was one on just like running and staying healthy. But what I love about these is that they're done in our native language and they also flash the native alphabet across too. So for someone who did not grow up speaking my native language, it's a good way for me to still stay connected that way. I do frequently go back. My family still lives there. So I am able to go home pretty often and actually attend different powwows and things like that. But in my day-to-day life, just having that ability to just log on to Instagram and watch some really interesting things. And they'll post when they're opening new buildings or new casinos or anything like that. So I get to stay pretty up to date, which is really nice.
That's wonderful. And it's definitely not something I would have thought I was going to hear today of that like my tribe is actually really active on social media. But I think that's really awesome and also at least personally goes to highlight some of the spaces and gaps in my knowledge as well because that's not something I thought I would have heard. So thank you. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
sharing. All right. So as we're talking about, kind of the ways that these traditions evolve, obviously posting to Instagram was not really a thing. More than I mean, even like I would say 18, 20 years ago. I think it's been around for the majority of my relationship with my husband. So that's 15 years. But so if we're talking in way, like, could you tell us some other ways that these traditions have continued to evolve while still honoring the roots of them?
Yeah, like if you look at some like different fashion choices and like the art and things like that, like you can look up some native artists and you can definitely still see some of like the native flair, if you will. Terry Greaves is an artist who I love. She does a lot of beadwork that still honors a lot of like the traditional like colors and symbols and things like that. But then she's got like these high-heeled Converse shoes that she's doing this beadwork on. I don't know if anyone on the call today is a fan of EDM music, but there's a type of dance that goes with EDM. It's called shuffling. And shuffling is actually derived from native dancing. So I thought that that was really cool. So if you actually look at, if you want to get on YouTube and find like a shuffling video, and then you can look up like native dancers, you can definitely see the correlation there, which I think is awesome.
I'm actually, as you were saying that, it kind of came to mind. There was, oh, there were a ton of uh, singers that were stitching a clip of a woman. I think she was throat singing. And it happened, it was like 2 or 3 years ago on TikTok, and it kind of kicked off this thing. And all of a sudden, I was seeing indigenous creators all over my For You page and thought it was absolutely amazing because it opened up this entire area that I had never thought to explore before. And also, a lot of the times, at least American centric, a lot of these practices are closed for very, very good reasons, or have, kind of been watered down by being not allowed to perform them for various horrible reasons.
Yeah.
So I think it was really, I think that's a really interesting way that, the internet is continuing to show us all the different facets of ourselves that we, might have been blind to before. I think that's
Yeah.
very cool. All right. Okay, so we have some kind of areas to go into that'll give us a little bit more of a historical context, as well as illustrate some of the more modern challenges that tribes or that Native individuals go through today. When you think back, are there some key historical events that you think people should know about when it comes to Native American history? I know indigenous practices for First Nations people up in Canada and how they treat that is completely different from how we do it here. And I know we do have an international audience. So, what has your experience been like? What have you seen be ignored that you think people should be aware of?
Yeah, I feel like, and like, so even though I lived on the reservation, I did go to public school just because it was a lot closer to where we lived and it was easier to get access to. But it was wild sitting in history classes and hearing like just lies being taught. Like, Christopher Columbus did not find America. We're often called, Indians because he actually landed in the Indies and thought that he was in America. So that's why we do prefer to be called, Native Americans because we're not Indians. But I think too, like that's a big piece. And then I don't even know if the Trail of Tears is even still being taught in schools. So the Trail of Tears is when they actually relocated a number, like, Cherokee, along with 100 other, hundreds of other tribes, from their uprooted them from their land and brought them down to what is present day Oklahoma. But so many people died during this. They were like of this exposure and things like that. I actually recently learned that the word Oklahoma means red man in Cherokee. Um, and so that there's that. And then we weren't even granted citizenship until 1924. And like we were we were here first. Like that's wild. And then we weren't even granted freedom of speech and religion until 1968. So that's not that long ago. So indigenous people have definitely endured a lot over time.
Can you elaborate a little bit on what you mean by the most recent one, the not freedom of speech and freedom of religion? Because I don't think that's going to be super clear to people who do not have they don't have a cultural identity that includes a level of spirituality or celebrate like specific like events or I'm stumbling over my words, but I think you know what I'm trying to get at here.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, obviously, all tribal nations have different religions. Some have the Christian religion. I mean, it all varies. But a lot of our spirituality also comes from what's been taught to us from our ancestors. And so a lot of different tribal nations believe different things. And so we weren't able, like, allowed to talk about that or practice that openly. It wasn't really recognized as to be okay up until, 1968.
Matt, and again, like I don't think we can stress this enough. These are people from outside the culture. These are the colonizers making the rules about what the people who were already here are no longer allowed to talk about. Okay.
Yeah,
Seeing any
it's
echoes? No, nobody's paying attention to the news today. No. Okay, just saying. Keep your ears open, kids. That's all I'm saying. All right. Okay, so as we're diving through into the idea, like a lot of these historical moments that people don't really know of, how do you see the effects of that historical trauma that impacts Native communities today?
I'm sorry, you kind of froze on me.
Oh,
Could you
I'm
say?
so sorry. How do you see, can you tell us a little bit about some of the ways you see the effects of those historical traumas that impact Native communities today?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of trust that has been lost over time. I think that there's a lot of fear of letting other people come into these communities. There's just been so much that's happened over time. And then I think that it can be kind of scary to, invite an outsider into these communities because we've seen what that has caused. Like you can even touch on the murders of the Osage. Like they were letting, essentially these white people come into their lives, marry them, then get murdered for mineral money. And it's just like there's a lot of fear that's been instilled that has definitely created a lot of just trust broken, I think, over time.
Yeah. Well, and I think this is a prime example of something that we saw highlighted in the beginning stages of the Me Too movement, where it was one of these instances of just because you haven't experienced it doesn't mean others haven't experienced it. And so I think that is yet another echo throughout history of like, you have to allow people to speak out on these things, because if you are silencing what they're allowed to express because they want to, how soon is it that you are silencing them from expressing things that they need to?
Yep, that's spot on.
Oh man, gosh. I've honestly been looking forward to this chat for so long. I don't mean to sound downer. I love talking about this stuff. So very
Yeah.
excited. I also want to call out, we've got a bunch of people chiming in the chat thread about their land acknowledgements as well. So thank you, y'all. That means so much.
Yeah.
Serta or Andrew chimed in saying San Diego is the home of the Kumeyaay people. It's also called Dueño in Spanish. Their tribes are categorized by Spanish missionaries through their shared language group, which is more common in academia or government things, which is kind of interesting. Kate Alonso is also chiming in. Kate says, I'm from Lawton, Oklahoma. I was very fortunate to grow up around the Kiowa and Comanche tribes. And while I am not Native American, my family life has been heavily influenced by all the wonderful people I have met. I was also able to take Kiowa as a language. Amazing, Kate.
That's amazing.
Um, and several Native American studies courses in college at the University of Oklahoma. Native American history was not accurately taught in Oklahoma schools. It was not until college that I learned anything accurate. So incredibly true, y'all.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And thank you, Kate, for sharing that.
Yeah, I won't hold it against you with the University of Oklahoma. I'm an OSU girl myself, but all good.
Okay. All right. As we go into, again, kind of, heavy territory, how can we acknowledge that our country's colonialist history may be painful for some and work to move forward in a way that empowers and celebrates Native American people?
Yeah, I think this is such a good question because I think something that's really important to point out is when you find out that someone is indigenous, it is it is hurtful to ask what percentage we are. So that actually is called blood quantum. So this is started, it's often used as a percentage, but it's really just a short-sighted way of just basically being like, how indigenous are you? Like I'll call out the elephant in the room. I'm a pale-skinned redhead. I do not look native. Meg and I were chatting before this, like genetics are hilarious because if you look at my grandpa next to my dad and like my uncles, like I got my dad's genes for sure. But so like I've had people ask me before in the past of like, oh, well, what percentage are you? That's just seen really as just short-sighted and just another enduring colonist notion that Native communities are still facing. I've even been asked to show my tribal card before as proof. And growing up on the reservation, looking the way that I do, I never felt like I fit in because I didn't look like everybody else. So like I've always struggled with that identity of being like, I don't look native enough. And then having people ask me that on top of already having these feelings, that doesn't feel good. And it's really just, we want to make sure that we're using more inclusive, questions and things like that.
Yeah. The percentage thing is just like it's gobsmacking, but also like I have been in rooms where I've absolutely heard this before and no one had a problem, no one outside the person being asked had a problem with the question being asked that way. And so it kind of highlights that like, what are you actually trying to know? Okay. Are you actually curious about what my culture means to me and how, how heavily it is impacting my daily life? Or are you really just asking like, but are you to show receipts? Like, what does that matter? I think this raises a lot of very, very good points. Because I mean, think about it. We've have people ask like, well, how Hispanic are you? But nobody ever asks for percentages.
Right.
No.
It's just like
So,
I think that you come to a place to just be like of curiosity, be like, oh, like like what tribe are you associated with? Like, tell me about your culture. Tell me about it. Like that. I'm like, oh, let's chat. I'll chat about this all day
well,
long.
because coming from a place of genuine curiosity is completely different from impress me with something. you
Yes.
know like
Yeah.
tell me why I should care about this. That's not the vibe we want, y'all. We want the that's interesting. Would you tell me more? I want to know more about blah blah blah. Can we talk about this? I love that. Okay. Oh, Kate also chimed in the chat saying it's okay, we all like pokies too. So apparently that feud has been quashed, so
We're
good.
we're good. We're all gravy.
All right. When it comes to issues around education and awareness, what's one thing that you wish more people understood about Native American and Indigenous culture?
Yeah, I think a big one is just that we're all different. There's over 500 federally recognized tribal nations in the US alone. So we all have different practices. Um, like we all all the cultures are very different. So for example, like I can speak to my own lived truth of being Osage, like getting to go to powwows as a kid and like our tribe is very much about community. So like even as a little kid when we'd go to these, like my parents were not they were not worried about me. I was out running around playing, like going around to different vendors and things like that. So like we're very much about community, about gathering with like food and drum circles and dances and things like that. But like if you look up at Washington State, like they may have very different cultures, very different, things. Like I mentioned earlier, like fry bread is like probably the most recognized food group with us. And like that could be something like that no other tribes even heard of. So I think it's just really important to know that very different. So like when you're talking to one indigenous person, that lived experience could be very different than someone else's.
Yeah, I think this is a massive thing to call out, especially when a lot of at least in North America, the indigenous experience was very much monolithized. Like it's very much been painted in one specific way by one specific group of people. And so, it is very important to recognize that look at who you're hearing the history from. Who wrote the history? Who wrote this is how we should see people. So
I mean,
very important to be critical.
yeah, no, like as a kid going like thinking back in school and just like being taught what Thanksgiving was, and I'm just sitting there as a kid just being like, oh no, this is not accurate whatsoever. And basically, yeah, like imagine being told as, an indigenous child that like what I actually know to be true is a lie and this is right. And like painting a certain type of person in a very positive light while making it seem like we were actually the aggressors and like we were the bad people. It's just like that's so damaging to like indigenous children.
Oh gosh, yeah. Are you kidding? Like, especially when you think about it, I mean, honestly, from like the white perspective, I remember growing up thinking like, oh yeah, and the pilgrims and the Indians, they ate together and it was wonderful and everybody was so happy. And then you find out about smallpox blankets, and all of a sudden you're like, wait, 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 this doesn't track. And
Yep.
you're right. It's also kind of coming out of the you're part of the problem thing, with all of us realizing like all like how much of this false narrative has been ingrained and taught to us because it goes to support the reasoning why these systemic issues exist. Um, oh, Maureen wants to know, could you tell us the truth about Thanksgiving? Obviously, it's a very long story, but would you be okay giving a shortened version?
Yeah, so essentially so in schools it was taught that yeah, the pilgrims came to break bread with the native people and everything was great and gravy, when in reality no, like the pilgrims came, I think you'd already mentioned it, with smallpox, and essentially was uprooting these native people from their land and stealing all their land essentially and murdering them by the thousands. So it's a pretty
And the
gruesome tale.
indigenous peoples that did help, that were trying to be like, hey, here's where you can find food, because obviously y'all are kind of dumb and don't know how to do this in this environment. Those food stores were then stolen or controlled or destroyed. And then yes, the smallpox blankets, it's a long story. It's not like we're not talking germ warfare necessarily. It's more of a misunderstanding that then had catastrophic consequences for germ exposure for a group of people who had no previous exposure to this, so had no immunity chances, and the germs did the work very
Yeah.
well, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So yeah, and Jobber is absolutely right. Humanity matters over everything. And if
Mhm.
you are similarly like confused, or if this is new information, you are not alone. Okay, that's all right. Please, please, please do your research and start reaching out and looking to follow and learn more about this. Okay, so thank you for your question, Maureen. Very, very, very much appreciate it.
Mhm.
All right, so what can schools do to be better about including Native American perspectives in their curricula? I feel like a lot of the ways that I learned about Indigenous people was generally only at Thanksgiving. So
Yeah.
let's talk how this could look.
I mean, here's the thing. I'm not an educator. I'm not about to be reforming our educational programs by any means. But I mean, let's just start with the truth. Like I said, like I don't know if that's still being taught about Christopher Columbus finding America in schools, but that's what I was taught. I'm also much older. So, but like I think it's just
It's okay, we're
important.
geriatric millennials. It's fine.
Pretty much. But yeah, just start with the truth. Like, let's actually be like truthful of like what happened. Like, I think that there needs to be more like history lessons done around like, the colonization of our people. But also too, it's like don't stop there. We still exist. We're not extinct. Like, let's incorporate like how indigenous people are doing things like in like the public, like any accomplishments that are happening, any like people like in leadership or anything like that, like making sure that we just have a seat at the table. That's all I
Mm-hmm.
want. So
Yeah.
making sure that it's not just a one and done, rinse and repeat at Thanksgiving conversation. Like keep us like let's keep up. Like we want to make sure that we stay relevant.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you're talking, I'm remembering a lot of the discussions that we had in like 2020 and 2021 that surrounded Black culture, and basically the idea that you were trying to contribute to this. And I think it's kind of the same idea, right? It's like there is an entire culture here that is being ignored by the mainstream. And just because you don't know it's there doesn't mean it doesn't exist, doesn't mean it's not valuable or should be celebrated, or even just is worthy of your attention. So I think it is
Yeah.
really important that we talk about building up these cultures where they exist now.
Yeah, I don't know, and I'm gonna butcher this TV show name because I have not seen it yet, and I know I need to. Is it Reservation Dogs or okay? Everyone has told me it's absolutely hilarious, and I need to watch it. But one of the actors, and again, I don't watch it, so I don't remember his name, walked a red carpet recently with the red handprint over his face, and I actually had a lot of my friends reach out because they were like, "What is this?" And I was like, "It's for the missing women because Native women are the most like they go missing the most." And like
Yep.
that, I was like, "Oh." Oh man, that looks like I mean, 'cause, like I've known about this for my whole life, and like I know, like not like a ton of details about it, but like to see that on like the like on a red carpet, and then like I'm a very sensitive person. I cry a lot if I have any of too much emotion, but like even watching Killers of the Flower Moon for the first time and hearing my native language on a big screen, I was sobbing. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. I was so stoked whenever I found out this was turning into a movie.
I love this. I'm grabbing a link right now in case y'all are curious about the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. Oh, yeah, sorry, that link looks hideous, but it leads you to their main page. It's I think it's don't they have a basis in Canada?
I believe so. I
Yeah,
know it's somewhere north, so I'm not
yeah.
entirely positive.
But honestly, it's absolutely
It,
fascinating, horrifying, but fascinating.
yeah.
Okay, let's talk about tribal recognition. Why is federal recognition important for Native American tribes, and what does that actually mean for those groups?
Yeah, so it really just means that, and I've got my notes over here, so just for, keep me honest here. But it officially acknowledges the tribe's sovereign status, which grants them the right to self-govern. So that also means that they get to keep their land, they get to govern themselves, they get to have, again, like the freedom of religion and speech and whatnot. So essentially, it means that no one can come and take that land from us. So it is still so what's in a really like random fun story about this. So my uncle used to be the chief operating officer of the Osage casinos, and they had built a new casino in Tulsa. And so I went to go tour it and it had a brewery in there. And so at one of the bars, you see a line. So that seal that I'd showed you all earlier in the conversation, you see where it stops. And you can see where at the bar there's no what are those things called? Slot machines on there. And he told me, he was like, this is where the sovereign land ends. So because like they actually like physically marked it off in the Tulsa casino to where like on this side you could drink and gamble, but on the other side you couldn't because inside was the sovereign land, outside was not. So it was illegal. And I was like, that was whoever came up with that was really, really smart. So if you're ever in Tulsa, go check out the casino and you can see that.
That is awesome. And when we're talking about sovereignty, would you care to break that down for people so they know exactly what we're discussing with that term?
Yeah, and like it's kind of difficult to describe, but essentially it just means that you have the right to govern yourself. So with us, like a lot of the tribal nations in these areas, they have their own governments. They actually can make their own laws and things like that as well.
Yeah, if anybody wants modern examples of this, especially with what's like top of my mind right now, the Maori people in New Zealand just ended, I believe it was a 9-day march over like 600 miles or something to protest a bill that was being introduced. You might have seen videos on it of people on their political floor doing a haka in protest. So if you haven't seen anything about that, go Google it, like haka protest New Zealand. It should come up. But it's fascinating and they have a lot more information and details about what sovereignty means to various indigenous groups. So if you're completely new to that subject, that's a good way to start with something that's modern and top of mind and, kind of in the zeitgeist right now. So good idea there. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the updating and the contemporizing of Native American life, at least in the eyes of people outside the communities. How is technology being used by Native Americans to share their stories and culture?
Yeah, so I mean, I've already touched on the whole social media thing, which I think is great. My husband, he's actually Nordic, so he has not much experience work, like talking with, Native Americans, and so he's actually gone and followed them, and he loves to hear the stories and things like that. But also too, like just digitizing like artifacts and like different like I guess like writings and things like that is going to be really important, especially in preserving the language. So I mentioned earlier, like we have a different alphabet. A lot of people probably don't know that, yeah, we have different alphabets and things like that. So being able to digitize that is just going to help keep the stories alive and keep like, I guess, like our culture going. So I think
Mhm.
it's really, really important that technology has come about and like all the beautiful things that we can do with it now.
Excellent. All right. So Native practices were, oh my God, advanced in so many ways. And then the colonizers came in and said, no, we're going to do it the way we did it back across the sea. How do traditional Native practices contribute to the environmental efforts that we are now having to make after we have ruined so much of, the planet?
Yeah, so obviously we're very in tune with nature and with everything. So there's a lot that Native cultures, communities are doing. I actually heard this recently, so I don't know if it's 100% true, so don't quote me on it, but I heard that corn was actually created by indigenous people. And so I was like, that's neat. If that's true, I need to like again, don't like someone fact check me here. But I think too, like what we used to do on our ranch, because we actually grew a lot of wheat. And we would, ship out a bunch of wheat to people is we would do controlled burns. So
Mhm.
we actually had like a fire truck on the ranch. And so controlled burns are really just when you go and burn off pieces of land. So that way we can produce new wheat for the next harvest. So there's a
Yeah.
number of different things that communities are doing.
Yeah, I mean, it puts nutrients back into the soil. The idea of like crop rotation was not necessarily a thing that needed to be done under a lot of indigenous planting practices. I got super into home gardening in 2020, like a lot of people, I'm sure. And so while I have not yet tried corn, I have researched a ton about Three Sisters planting, which is like it's corn, beans, and potatoes. No, corn, beans, and something. And the corn provides a stalk, and the beans grow up around, and corn, beans, and squash. That's what it is.
Nice.
But truly, like there are so many indigenous practices that contribute that fight against a lot of the environmental issues that we have created. So truly, y'all listen to your elders, listen to the people who know. Oh my goodness. Um, all right, let's talk native owned businesses. A lot of people practice their politics or their viewpoints with their wallets. So what should people know about native owned businesses, or are there any that you'd like to highlight for us?
Yeah, so there's actually one I saw that someone here is coming in from Seattle. Snow, one of my favorite stores when I go up there to visit, because I'm up there frequently, is called Eighth Generation, I believe. So they are actually from the Snoqualmie tribe. But they have some beautiful, if y'all need any holiday gift ideas, go to their website. So they have like beautiful blankets. Like I think all of my dog collars are from there. Like bath towels, candles. But it's a company where they've invited in different native artists to actually come in and create, and then they will sell it on their website or within their store. And then there is another one that I love because if you're a skincare girly like me, Native Beauty is actually a native woman-owned business, and she actually uses acorn oil in her products that's grown on her tribe. So phenomenal skincare stuff. So again, if y'all need any holiday ideas, I strongly recommend checking these two places out.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. I love that idea. Um, okay, when it comes to Orquita is asking about sending links. We will do our best, and I'm going to see if I can attach those to the outreach email that goes out when we email out y'all the link to this event or to this recording when it gets posted as well. So thank you, Orquita. Let's talk cultural events. While some cultural events within the indigenous tribes are closed for a variety of reasons that we do not need to be justified to anyone, um, let's talk if there are any that you think people should try to experience.
Yeah, so a lot of places do open powwows. So Austin, in my city now, we actually do one every year that I like to go to. And if you ever have an opportunity to attend one, like I would strongly encourage it. The feeling of being at a powwow is just something that you can't even really put into words. It's just such a beautiful thing. However, I want to make sure that everyone is respectful. And a lot of places don't want you taking photos of the dancers or of the drum circle. So I would absolutely ask for permission before doing that. But then also to just making sure that like you stay out of the arena because like that's definitely like the area for the dancers and things like that. But yeah, I mean, there's like again, depending on where you live, like there's a number of different things that you could go to, but I do love the powwows. It's one of my favorite things.
Cool. Yeah. All right. I know we have gone over on time. I hope y'all don't mind. We only have two more questions. I wanted to make sure that we got to all of them because there were such amazing, amazing questions to be answered today. Would you be comfortable sharing a story with us that highlights your connection to your Osage heritage? Like when you think about your connection to your heritage, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, like so again, like if you're not familiar with the story of Killers of the Flower Moon, like Molly Burkhart actually babysat my grandmother. My grandfather, my great grandfather was actually the one who found Henry Roan's body, which that was a big turning point in the whole investigation here. And so like like my grandma, I've grown up hearing these stories of just like how like terrifying that time was. And so to think like, again, like this was a moment where people were like white people were coming in and marrying Osage. So like again, you think that you found like your life partner, the love of your life, to then be like they were killing them like for this money for the mineral rights. And so to think back to know that like my ancestors had to go through that and I'm here today, like I get like such a strong sense of just like pride, to be honest. Like the Wazazi people are very resilient. And so yeah, I hope that answered your question.
Absolutely. Okay, last question. What are your hopes for better representations of Native Americans in media and pop culture going forward? I mean, we've seen everything from, thankfully, a lot of sporting teams changing their mascots under
Yeah.
great protest from a lot of people. But what are some of the things that you would like to see going forward?
I think that there's still work to be done there because there's definitely still some mascots, and that can definitely, it's again just a short-sighted way, like that's the only way that people view us.
Mhm.
I think just highlighting more of the accomplishments of what Native people have done. Like just to see like more movies being made. Like I think that the whole thing of the Killers of the Flower Moon, like this I think was just such and I'm not just saying this because I'm biased because it was my tribe. I would be happy seeing more people because like we hear it all the time. Representation matters. Like there are indigenous kids out there that need to see more of their people on the big screen and things like that. So I would love to see just more movies, more TV shows being made, and just again, more conversations just in general about the accomplishments that we've done.
Yes. Well, never mind the fact that like not all of indigenous history is horrific. You know what I mean? A
Yeah.
lot of indigenous history when combined with white people is horrific. However, there are a multitude of accomplishments, stories. We don't need 8,000 Fast and the Furious movies, y'all. We need to hear real stories that exist that really should be celebrated. Don't get me wrong, I love a good car chase, but I'm just saying, there's better ways that we can be doing this. All right, I did want to end with one of the slides from your presentation about ways to celebrate National Native American Heritage Month.
Yeah.
Do you want to elaborate on any of these or kind of give us your 2 cents of how you will be celebrating?
Yeah, I mean, I think a good way is just start with yourself. We've already kind of talked about using that inclusive communication skills, not asking people what percentage they are. So just make sure that you're educating yourself on a more inclusive language. I think that Meg, you've already mentioned this, and again, a lot of y'all have commented, which I love to see. Discover the tribal land that you're living on. I've mentioned there's over 500 federally recognized Native tribes in the US, so each has its own unique culture and history. So again, to read books that tell Native stories. I know that I've again shamelessly plugged Killers of the Flower Moon, but again, it's a really great book. But like, look up different books and things like that. And then, of course, support a local Native owned business. My mom and stepdad live in a very small town outside of Houston. And I actually stumbled across a Native owned like little boutique in town. And I'm like, oh, every time I go visit them, I go by. I'm like, I have to go in there and see what they have. So
Mhm.
yeah, if you can find any native local owned businesses, I would really encourage y'all to do that.
Excellent, excellent ideas. Jordan, I
Yeah.
wanted to thank you so much for spending time with us this morning, for going over on your time. I know you've got a big, big Friday ahead of you, but this was really wonderful. Thank you so, so much. I hope we get to do this again soon, and I'm just very appreciative of your time and expertise today. So thank you for sharing it with us.
Absolutely, of course.
All right, y'all, that's going to bring us to the end of time today. However, I just want to say a massive thank you to all of our attendees. Whether y'all joined us for the full 45 minutes or only a couple, we really appreciate y'all stopping by. And I'm very, very appreciative, not just because, you come to these events, so I have a job, but I'm even more appreciative that you took time out of your day to learn something new about a group that probably you're not a part of or that you absolutely do want to support. So for that and for taking time out of your day to to educate yourself, whether you are a little treat person or not, listen to Meg. Okay, give yourself a pat on the back. Gold star, cookie, maybe not Starbucks, maybe go to your local coffee place. But just saying, y'all, thank you so much for spending time with us today. We have loved spending this time with you. If this was your first Power to Fly event, I sincerely hope it will not be your last. So go out there, have the day, week, or weekend you deserve, and we will be here whenever you come back. Bye, y'all.